This segment of the Alice Stewart Show is brought to you by Aero Plumbing. For all your household or business plumbing needs, call Aero Plumbing at 1-866-PLUMBER or schedule an appointment online at aeroplumbing.net.
Welcome back to the Alice Stewart Show, 7:35, 25 minutes before 8 o'clock. Time for Young Guns. Joining me this morning, Josh Blevins, former Young Democrats of Arkansas president and Blevins Investment Group chairman, and Dylan Haney, former Arkansas College Republican chairman and student at Ouachita University. Dylan and Josh, great to have you here.
Good to be here. Good morning, Alice.
All right, great to have you here, especially 5 days out from a big midterm elections, and it's a big day. And we have some major races here in Arkansas. A lot of folks keeping an eye on the big Senate race between Senator Mark Pryor and Congressman Tom Cotton. And it's getting a lot of buzz, and folks in D.C. are even talking what's going to shape voters' minds when it comes to voting for senators and members of Congress. Senator John Barrasso, a Republican from Wyoming, he says it appears to be a good day next Tuesday for Republicans, and going to have a very close midterm election, very exciting for both parties. Senator Barrasso says he is optimistic because the country is in such shambles, so he says, and he thinks voters will understand that and vote towards Republicans next Tuesday.
There is palpable anger and anxiety all across the country where people believe the country is heading in the wrong direction under President Obama and that things are just out of control with whether it's ISIS, Ebola, the VA hospital scandal, the IRS, the whole list of things. There is this fear around America.
Josh, your thoughts from the Democrat perspective. Do you agree with what Senator Barrasso says?
That is one of the most pessimistic views of America that I have ever heard. It's constant, but it's becoming constant from Republicans. You're constantly hearing, what's wrong with America? What's wrong with America? Everything we have to fear in the outside world. And to some extent, a lot of that rhetoric has been effective with some voters. But there's plenty that is right with America. And I hope that as voters go to the polls, they will see, we have the least productive Congress on record. And that's a statistical fact. That's not a political opinion. We know that this Congress has passed fewer laws than any Congress ever. And if you're the kind of person like me who says, great, I like fewer laws, I like more freedom, keep in mind that it takes passing a law to repeal a law. So literally, nothing is happening. No laws are getting passed. No laws are getting repealed. And in a midterm election, particularly in the second year or the second term of a presidential administration, whatever is happening is always blamed on the president. That's a trend throughout American political history. So there's no question that Democrats are fighting somewhat of an uphill battle in this election.
All right, Dylan, your thoughts weighing in on Senator Barrasso's comments that people believe the country is going in the wrong direction due to President Obama.
Well, sure, Alice. I think the reality is that's the truth, honestly. I agree with Josh that there is a lot of positive things going on in the country, but at the same time, we have to face the reality that there's been one crisis after another, and that the last poll I saw said that 7 in 10 Americans are angry at the direction that the country is headed. Like the specific word angry was used. They're very upset with the direction that the country was headed in. And then President Obama comes out and says that he's not on the ballot this fall, but make no mistake, he says, his policies are on the ballot. And I think that is affecting a lot of the perspective on these races across the country. And yeah, if you look at a lot of the close Senate races and coming up in the midterm elections, they are within 5 points of one another. But the general trend is the Republicans have an advantage. People are upset at the direction that the country is headed in, particularly with the fact that there is one crisis after another with ISIS and Ebola and all of these things going on, and I think you're going to see that reflected on Tuesday in the elections. That's just the unfortunate reality of the state that our country is in terms of its leadership.
And
to pick up on Dylan's point, there are a lot of races in the country that are within a couple of points of each other, and that is super interesting and impressive to me in the context of the fact that, say, a week ago, I read in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette a detail of the outside spending from non-Arkansans, people who, care about lobbyists in D.C. Those sorts of folks had spent $13,742,932 supporting Tom Cotton in this race. Mark Pryor, from the same types of lobbyists, had received $230,000. So $13.7 million versus $230,000, and yet the race is only 2 percentage points apart, is an incredibly impressive. It gives me faith in the people of Arkansas that in the face of that kind of incredible spending by outside groups, that Mark Pryor is within 2 percentage points of his opponent.
Well, we'll see how that shapes up on Tuesday. And Josh, to your point of this being the least productive Congress we've seen, Democrat Congressman Chris Van Hollen addresses that issue and what makes it not very productive. He spoke at the Aspen Institute, and he puts the onus in terms of gridlock on the Republicans. Here is Chris Van Hollen.
If you ask Democrats in polls whether they're interested in compromising to get things done for the country, you have about 60% who say yes. When you ask that same question of Republicans, you get much less interest.
Dylan, you're the young Republican here. Do you see gridlock result of Republican inaction or Democrats?
Well, what I see is Senator Harry Reid on the Senate side, considering that many of these elections that we're looking at on Tuesday have to deal with these really close Senate seats, Senator Harry Reid has tried to protect many of these incumbent Democrat senators by not bringing bills to the floor. His papers are probably stacked high to the ceiling in his office of bills that he has not brought to the floor for a vote. And so, yes, the great Democratic talking point that there is gridlock and that it's a not productive Congress. But the fact of the matter is, our system of government requires it being passed in the House of Representatives and the Senate. And if the Senate is not going to bring the bill to the floor for a vote, how can anything get accomplished or passed?
Josh?
Chris Van Hollen is exactly right. As long as voters return to office, Republican elected officials of extreme partisan ideological rigidity, we're going to continue to have a dysfunctional Congress. This is not the way the Democrats and Republicans have always behaved in Congress. But as we have seen the Republican Party get more ideologically entrenched, it's exactly what's going to happen. Remember January 2008, which in political terms is eons ago in the collective political memory. But President Bush was facing looming economic disaster, and he asked congressional leaders who happened to be Democratic at the time to help with the stimulus program. At that point, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid got together and said, absolutely, we're going to help you pass a stimulus package that prevents the loss of millions of jobs. And they did this knowing that there was an election coming up and that the president in power, who happened to be George Bush, a Republican, would get all of the credit, which would hurt Democrats politically. But they did it anyway because they knew it was the right thing to do for the country. We have the roles reversed. Now it's a Democratic president and a Republican Congress, and Republicans are not willing to put politics aside and do the same thing that Democrats did for President George Bush in 2008.
All right. Well, we will certainly keep a close eye on that. And in terms of moving forward, of course, 6 seats determine who will be controlling the Senate next week. And this race here in Arkansas is a big factor, and it could sway control in the Senate. And we'll see if that gridlock continues. We're going to take a break, and we come back talking with our young guns here, and we will see where the younger generation are leaning in terms of their vote. Will they go Republican? Will they go Democrat? We will see. This segment of the program brought to you by Aero Plumbing. For all of your household or business plumbing needs, call Aero Plumbing 501-588-3200 or go online at aeroplumbing.net.